Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Division video, and in this video I wanted to put together a quick guide for those of you guys coming back to 1.4. Some of you guys have been asking me questions on how to make the most out of 1.4, some people have said they've had some time away and they're not really sure where to start, so while you guys have had a day with it already, I thought I'd put together 9 things that you should definitely do now that you're back in 1.4. So if you do enjoy this, you do find it helpful, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you have any questions. Also let me know how you guys have been getting on with 1.4 as well. But let's get started. So, first and foremost, number 9, very important one. Make sure you run from the base of operations down to the terminal. Yes, you can now do that. You no longer have to walk for like 25 painful seconds from the top to the bottom. You can now sprint to your heart's content. Probably not that important, yes, but you can do it, so make the most of it. Admittedly, I probably spent most time running back and forth, which actually equates to the same time that it would have taken me to walk there once normally, but either way, it's worth it. Then in at number 8, something slightly more serious. Consider crafting and recalibrating your stuff. Now, if you guys cast your mind back to 1.3, then you know that if you bought any blueprints from the Dark Zone, they needed Division Tech, high-end Division Tech. However, that has now been removed, so those items you had before, and by extension the items you're going to buy now, will not need Division Tech to craft, so it'll be a lot easier to kind of go around gathering the materials. That won't be quite as much of a bottleneck, so do consider crafting, especially if you go and visit some of the vendors. You'll find they have new blueprints, not necessarily for new, never before seen weapons, but at least new relevant gear score weapons, so there might well be things that you actually want to craft now, because 1.3 hit a bit of a weird place where there was no real need to craft, whereas crafting has now been brought back into the equation, so there is actually value in doing this. There are level 33 blueprints, gear score 229 weapons, gear score 229 armor pieces, things like that, so definitely do consider. And as for the recalibration front, if you guys are trying to chase down that perfect weapon roll, then you might remember that back in 1.3, if you recalibrated a weapon talent, you were then given 3 choices to choose from. You now get 6, so it makes it just a little bit easier to try and get that talent that you're after. Then moving on to number 7, explore the open world. The open world is now host to roaming world bosses, so people like Bullet King or any of the other named guys, they roam around and you can kill them just like you would in the Dark Zone, and they will drop loot, which is again relevant loot dependent on your world tier, so they can be gear set pieces, high-end weapons, etc. And they respawn every 4 hours, so if you kill, say, Bullet King, 4 hours later, you can go back and kill him again, but do bear in mind that there are a load of these here. I'll actually leave a link to a map that someone made in the description box down below. It gives you a rough location of all of the world bosses that are in the open world section, so definitely check that one out if you're going to go and try and farm, because there are quite a few there, so by the time you've worked your way through most of them, then you won't be too far off the respawn time. But it's definitely worth your while doing, and also don't forget that HVTs are now probably one of the most fun activities, because they don't just give you Lone Star. They can now give you basically anything. So if you're after a gear set piece, don't just suddenly think, well, screw HVTs because I'm not after Lone Star. That is now a thing of the past. You can now do them, they're pretty fun, and they're a really good way to gear up, and they're also a good thing to do solo. Then moving on to number 6, collect your weapon skins. Yes, that's right, you guys might remember that back in 1.3, weapon skins used to take up inventory space. They no longer do, so any that you had in your inventory will now be transferred into a weapon skin menu. But that also means if you were holding off, say, buying new weapon skins from the weapon skin vendor, then now is the time to try and work towards completing your collection. So grab them, make the most of them, because this is something we've been asking for a very long time. Then moving over to number 5, visit the vendors. It goes without saying that with a new world tier system and with new blueprints and things available, it's worth your time going and visiting all the vendors. The special equipment vendor that used to be at the top of the base of operations is now down in the terminal. Basically, those two used to kind of overlap a little bit, so the one at the top has been removed and moved to the bottom, and then he's kind of replaced the one that was there. So your special equipment vendor is now down in the terminal. Also, while for the most part they might not sell things that are that useful to you, don't just ignore some of the safe house vendors, because, shout out to Dark Zone Pilot for this one, sent me a tweet. If you go to the safe house in Meat Locker, at least at the time of making this video, he is currently selling a high-end laser pointer for your sidearm. And if you guys have been playing Division for a while, then you'll probably know that one of the most elusive items was a high-end item that can go on the underbarrel of your sidearm. Normally you're stuck with a green one or a blue one. You can now grab a high-end one, so it goes without saying, it's worth your time to go and visit the vendors. As for number 4, open your sealed caches. If you guys have been saving sealed caches from, say, pre-1.4, open them. If you guys play through and just do general activities, even if you're level 30, every single time you effectively level up again, i.e. you've earned enough XP to kind of reach that next threshold, you are awarded a new seal cache, and you can then open that for a chance at high-end items, weapons, gear pieces, mods, gear set pieces, things like that. Plus, you can also go and buy seal caches from some of the different vendors, so if there are things you're after, gear set pieces, weapons, mods, again, those are some options. Moving over to number 3, consider re-entering the Dark Zone. Now, I know the Dark Zone is not something for everyone. I know some people don't like PvP, I know some people don't like the rogue aspect of the game. The Dark Zone is something that I personally do really enjoy. I spend a lot of time in it, and I have a lot of fun in there, but if the Dark Zone was something that you were put off with before, then do consider re-entering. As mentioned, the vendors, they'll have new blueprints, which will actually be relevant again, and given the new NPC scaling and the way that time to kill and time to be killed has been altered, and it's much better in 1.4, then you're probably going to find that a lot of your frustrations from before will not be quite so prevalent this time around. Of course, there's nothing to stop 4 people going up against 1. That is the nature of a PvP zone, but at least on the boss front, when fighting AI enemies, then you can definitely solo things once again. As for number 2, consider trying new gear sets. Some of you guys may find that when 1.4 dropped, the build that you might have spent ages building before is not quite as good as before. Maybe it's not viable, maybe you fancy a change. Well, the good thing is that a lot of the gear set pieces have been changed, they've got new bonuses, and while some of them, yes, they may be a nerf, others are different in a way that makes them more balanced, but the long and short of it is there are lots more options now, so it's not just a case of one gear set or 2 or 3 builds are the kind of be all and end all. There are loads of different options to mess around with, so do consider checking out some of the gear sets, some of the ones that you might have overlooked before. Look at them again, because they might actually be suitable for what you like. One example being, say, Firecrest. Firecrest is something that a lot of people might not necessarily consider, but it is actually pretty cool. It's a build that I'm working on at the moment, where if you pair it with the right skills, you can get some really good results on it. But Firecrest aside, the point is, try out the gear sets, try out what's new, try out what's changed, and don't just try and fall into the same kind of ballpark as before. And then finally, in at number 1, of course, make sure you take full advantage of the world tier system. So the world tier system, for those of you guys that might not be aware, is the way that difficulty is controlled in 1.4. Basically, when you select your world tier, that determines the difficulty for all activities across the board. Incursions, missions, underground, HVTs, everything you do in the open world, it doesn't affect the Dark Zone, but everything you do in the open world is controlled by the world tier. And if you're starting out fresh, then you'll start in world tier 1, but as you progress and you increase your gear score, then you unlock higher world tiers. Typically, once you get to the cap of a world tier, you unlock the next one, which of course means that you're ready to go forward, and you can start climbing like that. And the loot that drops in that world tier is relevant to that particular tier, whereas the difficulty of encounters, be that missions, underground, incursions, simply determines the quantity of loot. So difficulty is now tied to quantity, and the world tier is what actually controls the difficulty. So make sure you take advantage of this, because if you've got a friend that say you're trying to get them into Division and you want to boost them, you can invite them to your world tier and you can run them through things to level up really quickly. For example, today, massive shout out to Han Solo, I was leveling a brand new character on PC, and in about 2 hours I went from level 0 to level 20 just because he was boosting me in world tier 4. Alternatively, if your friend is just struggling and you want to help them out in kind of like their appropriate tier, you can drop down to them, help them out. And also prices of items at vendors are respective of world tiers, so if you're trying to get some free crafting materials really quickly, you can drop down to world tier 1, buy some cheap items, dismantle them, and then jump back up. Of course, you wouldn't drop down to buy things because they won't be gear score relevant, but it is still a means to grab some materials. So that, my friends, is pretty much it. That was just a quick list of 9 things you should consider doing in 1.4. Again, if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to be streaming some more Division tomorrow, and of course on Friday as well, so do stay tuned. Head over to twitch.tv/Arekkz Gaming if you guys want to catch me there. But thank you for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.